As All Hallows Eve gets closer, celebrate the spooky with Parcast Presents Halloween. This new podcast series on Spotify brings you 3 blood-curdling episodes each week in October. From urban legends to haunted places, Parcast Presents Halloween takes you on a historical tour of terror. Hear the stories of an escaped killer on the prowl, a gruesome discovery by 4 young friends, the legendary killings of Salem's first witches, and much more. Search for Parcast Presents Halloween in the Spotify app and start listening for free. So this happened to me and my mum last year, and we live in a pretty bad part of town. It's not unusual for us to encounter a couple of weirdos in our day-to-day life, but this one encounter really scared us both. We actually moved out shortly after this all happened. So, straight to the story. Me and my mum were just arriving home when we see a man standing in front of our main door, very skinny and tall, and looked like he was in his mid-40s. My mum questioned what he was doing and if he needed anything from us. He said that he was our new neighbour and that he would be living upstairs. Usually the landlord only rented the upstairs to tourists, so we thought that it was a little bit strange, but who cares, right? He said that he lost his key though and asked us if we had a spare. My mum told him of course we didn't and that he would need to contact the landlord about that. He continued standing there and we kind of had to push by him to get into our house. My mum quite assertively told him to step away, and I guess he got the hint and then he left. A couple of days go by and we haven't seen the man, but we have definitely been hearing him, because he'd been keeping us up basically every night. He was always knocking on the floor like he was dropping marbles or hitting the broom on the wood or something. He would sing loudly in the middle of the night or just talk for hours and hours on end. He was either talking to himself or on the phone because we never heard anyone else's voice. But my mum is that type of person who just really doesn't put up with this type of disrespect, but she was trying hard not to start a conflict with our new neighbour. The breaking point though happens when he threw a big block of cement down from his balcony to our garden. My mum actually caught him doing it while one of our cats was minding its own business, just chilling on the grass. He was obviously aiming to hit him, but thankfully, he ran away just in time. But my mum absolutely lost it, and she made her way upstairs. They got into a heated fight, and our front neighbours ended up having to break it up. My mum was really upset, and for a long time we didn't hear or see it. Now, for this last part, I need to just explain a little bit about how my house is built. So we have our main door, which is directed to a road, and we have a back entrance, which is where we have a small garden. The garden is surrounded by a wall as well. It's quite high, but wouldn't be completely impossible to jump over. My bedroom door goes out directly to the garden as well, and I usually leave my door cracked open so my cats can come in during the night. And based on that information, you've probably already guessed where this is going. So one night, while I'm already sound asleep, this twat jumped over our wall and creeped into my room. I actually woke up to him stroking my hair and cheek repeatedly. I slowly woke up and took a while to just kind of adjust my sight to realize that it was actually him. I screamed really loud and my mum rushed in swinging a lamp in her hand. He tried talking his way out of it, saying that he just needed our help and blah blah blah, but my mum was having none of it and continued to swing at him. He ran back out of the door, and we obviously didn't run after him. My mum just went straight to the door and locked it. We called the police, and right after that, our landlord. He wasn't dumb enough to go back upstairs because he knew for sure that the police were going to come for him now. So we needed all the information we could get about him to tell the police. The landlord was very confused though and said that he hadn't actually rented it and had no idea what we were talking about. And when the police arrived, they confirmed that he had actually busted the door lock and had been living inside for the past 2 weeks. I didn't go upstairs, but my mum did, and she said that it smelled so bad that she almost threw up because he had basically been just living in his own filth. Also, he apparently had been in my room before because the police found one of my pajama shorts upstairs. The police told us that he had a couple of sketchy things in his possession and to be careful not to leave any doors open in case he came back. He was never caught and we never actually saw him again. My mum swore that once in a while she could still hear him upstairs mumbling. We were both very paranoid for a long time and never really felt relaxed living there again, but about 2 months later, we moved out. In the fall of 2010, I decided to go back to college. I was a single mum of 3 boys, but they were all in school now, and me going back was finally possible. The school that I went to is a regional campus to a very large university, and located in a neighborhood that is known for crime, meth, heroin, prostitution, etc. But it was only a 20-minute drive from my house, and I didn't feel unsafe about going there. The first day and the first class were intimidating, I'll admit. I didn't know anyone, and I was a lot older than most of the students. I was 28 at the time. And so I sat down in the back of the room at a table, and a few minutes later, a lady who was around my age sat down next to me. She was very skinny, smelled like cigarettes, greasy hair, sunken eyes, but she started to talk to me and she seemed normal enough. She started off the conversation telling me that she chose to sit next to me because I was wearing the prettiest blouse in the room. Strange, but as an awkward person myself, I leave a lot of leeway for people to say or do awkward things before I think too deep into things. She didn't have a backpack, any books, a pen, notebook, nothing. She said that her financial aid hadn't come through yet, but she didn't want to fall behind on classes and asked could she share my books. I agreed and gave her a pen and paper also. After the first class, she asked if I would mind going to the library with her so that she can scan some of the pages to take home. I agreed and we started to head back to the library. She stops and looks at her phone and says that her son just texted and needs her to come home to do something, and she asks if I would like to come with her. I tell her that I have another class shortly and unfortunately I can't go with her. I ask if she still wants to go to the library first, and she says no, that she has to go and get her son, but really can't go alone. I kept telling her that I can't go with her, and then she just starts crying. At this point, we were in a common area outside, and the parking lot was to one side, and the library to the other. I tell her that I need to go to the library, and she's welcome to come, talk, whatever she needs, but I have to go. I didn't like being outside away from people with this woman anymore, and I was just trying to get back to a busier area. She gets really upset, though, and then starts screaming, basically saying F you to me. She may have actually cussed at me. I can't really remember how the interaction went exactly because I was just frozen in confusion by how quickly she transitioned from friendly, then to crying and scared, and now to screaming in my face a slew of just hateful and angry things. And at this, I turn around and start walking to the library and called my friend so that I would have someone aware if this lady tried anything more than just screaming. I get to the library vestibule and watch her through the glass doors. She's standing at the parking lot, and then a car pulls up with a man in it, and is obviously upset with this woman. They're arguing, but I can't hear them from inside the vestibule. But eventually, she gets in the car and leaves with him. The next day, I was really dreading class because I didn't know what this woman's attitude would be that day. But she wasn't there the next day, and in the end, she never came back to any classes. I didn't know her name or even at the time how to look at a class roster, but looking back, I'm fairly certain that she was not enrolled at the school at all and, for whatever reason, was trying to get me to leave with her. I do wish that I knew her intentions, but at the same time, I'm glad that I never had to find out. This has been a story that has stuck with my dad for years, and he legit still gets weirded out whenever he is asked about it. A thing to know about my dad is that he is literally the most straightforward guy you'll ever meet. He sees no use in lying and tells the truth, quite brutally in fact, 24/7. And quite honestly, I've never not believed this story. So this happened in the mid to late 80s when my dad was in high school. My dad had a good friend who we'll call Ryan. My dad and Ryan played a sport together, baseball or football, I think. It was after a sports practice, though, where my dad decided to crash at Ryan's house since it was super late. Now, Ryan lived in this huge house that was pretty old. It was also way out in the country. Ryan and my dad, and even some other friends, always joked around about how the house was haunted. Dogs barking at nothing, security alarms blaring constantly for no reason, the house would always feel freezing cold, etc. But my dad admitted to me that he never really loved to spend the night at Ryan's place because it just gave him the heebie-jeebies. But obviously a high school football or baseball player would never admit to that. That night, though, Ryan's parents were out, so it was just Ryan and my dad. They watched some TV and had some pizza before they decided to just hit the hay. This is where I would like to acknowledge, too, that no alcohol and no drugs were involved while they were hanging out. The setup was going to be that Ryan was sleeping upstairs in his room while my dad slept on the couch with Ryan's dog beside him. And from here on, this will be told from Ryan's account. So, according to Ryan, he got ready for bed as usual before shutting the door behind him. He fell asleep pretty fast since he was tired from practice, but it was then that he felt something jump on his bed. He brushed his arm against it, thinking that it was the dog. It was then that he felt licking all over his face, like legit licking over and over again all over his face. But waking up expecting to see his dog, the room was completely empty, and the door was shut. But he noticed that his face was still completely wet. Downstairs, my dad still had not fallen asleep yet, so he was watching TV with the dog. Remember too that this was over the course of around 45 minutes or so, and according to my dad, it doesn't take long for Ryan to come bolting down the stairs screaming bloody murder while asking where the dog was. My dad was obviously super confused and thought that Ryan's story was just crazy. He told him that the dog never left his side and that he never even fell asleep. I can remember my dad telling me, though, just how shaken up Ryan looked. It was to the point that my dad believed him and even stayed up with him for the rest of the night. According to my dad, his old friend still doesn't think that it was any kind of a dream, but they both have no explanation to any of it, which is what bothers them the most, I think. I'm new to this whole storytelling business, but I hope you guys enjoyed this story because it's something that has never left my family. I moved to Denton about a year and a half ago now. I was always told, too, that it was a pretty safe place, and I felt the same when I lived in my first house. So when I moved to my new place about 8 months ago, I didn't think that it would be much different. Actually, I thought that it would be safer since my last place, my roommates never, and I mean never, locked the doors. In the new place, I have a roommate and a big dog, so that makes me feel safer too. We lived in a good area where there were families around and stuff, but since I've moved here, there have been 4 different instances where men have come to my house and done something really strange. All have occurred at night from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Here's the first one. So the first one happened about a month into us living here. It was 3 a.m. and the doorbell rang. And I mean, who the hell would be at my door right now? As I'm walking to the door, I can see and hear this person trying to get in. Me, terrified, I look through the peephole and I see the silhouette of a guy that looks like my roommate's ex. They had just broken up. So I wake her up and I tell her. She opens the door a few minutes later and the guy just isn't there anymore. She peeps her head out of the door and sees that same guy inside my car. I'm a dumb person and I didn't lock it that day, so she yelled at him and he just sprinted away. The second time it was 9 p.m. and I'm home alone. Someone rings the door and my lazy ass didn't get up to get it. A couple of minutes later, the door rings again. But this time I get up and no one's at the door. I open it and I see 2 men in an SUV pulling into my driveway. They're almost all the way up to the house, and once they see me, they stop the car, put it into reverse, and leave. I don't know what they wanted or were going to do, but it was weird. Another night, my roommate is home alone. It's 9:30 p.m. and the door rings. She doesn't get it, thinking that it must be her Amazon package or something, and they'll just leave it at the door. The door rings again though, so confused, she gets up and looks through the peephole. There's a guy with a black ball cap on, and he's looking down so she can't actually see his face. She asks, "Can I help you?" "Hey, I have your Amazon package here." Okay, do I need to sign or anything?" He then says, no." "Okay, can you just leave it on the ground then?" And then he just ends up standing there for a minute or so. She nervously stares back at him through the peephole, waiting for him to walk away. He eventually does walk away, but for about an hour and a half after that, our big-ass dog keeps growling at the door. And I can attest to the fact that she has never done anything like that. Another weird thing too is that Amazon stops delivering at 9 p.m. Maybe he was just running late? Now, the last one is definitely the creepiest. This happened last month at around 1:30 a.m. and I wasn't home, but my roommate was, with her boyfriend Alex. They're laying in bed, and from the corner of Alex's eye, he sees a pair of eyes in the crack of the blinds from her window. He gets up and runs outside and sees a grown-ass man in a construction vest looking through a window. The guy jumps when he sees Alex and grabs our trash cans right next to her window. He pretends to just be a trash dude, kindly taking our empty trash cans out for us. Didn't know that they had night shifts now, on Fridays. Trash only comes Monday and Wednesday mornings here. So yeah, we have no idea who this guy was, but he got out of there quickly. Those are my stories, and I've heard that there's a man that the DPD are looking for. He's forcing himself into women's apartments in Denton, and it's sad that I have to live in fear because I'm a target being a woman. I know that it may sound a bit dramatic to many, but after all of these experiences that I've had, can you blame me? On top of this guy that's been named a serial offender on the loose too, I'm pretty terrified to live alone next semester. I've never been scared of that, and I'm a pretty tall and heavier woman, and I've grown up with all brothers. I thought that I knew how to fight, but now I'm just like, could I help myself? I don't really know, and I'm generally a calm and collected person, but this is giving me really bad anxiety every time that I'm home alone and I hear something. Anyway, thanks for listening to my stories, and if any of you guys have experienced anything like this around here, I would love to know that I'm not alone. Back when I was 18, my best friend Anne and I used to go to this club quite frequently. Legal age to drink in my country is 18. It was a pretty trendy place with cheapish drinks and really good music. My dad never stopped me from going clubbing, but he always told me not to get drunk and to be aware of my surroundings, always. My mum always told me to look out for Anne as well, and for Anne to look out for me. Girls need to stick together kind of thing. So, it was an average ladies' night on Wednesday, where girls enter for free and drinks are cheaper. Anne and I start drinking and we get pretty buzzed, but not drunk. Anne needed to go to the bathroom, so I followed her and waited outside. So the male and the female bathrooms are right next to each other, and there's a sofa in the front so people can sit and wait. On the sofa there was a girl who was obviously very, very drunk, and she was in between two guys who were laughing, but it just looked a bit off to me. But they were kind of harassing her, which could have been mistaken just as two friends having a laugh at their female friend being drunk. But they proceeded to literally carry her out of the club. At this stage, Anne comes out, and I mentioned to her that this girl looks like she may be in danger. But we both tail them, and the more that I see them interact with her, the more that I feel that they're just out to sexually assault her or something like that. My friend and I go up to her and say, "Oh my goodness, it's you, Angela. There you are." We didn't know her actual name, but we just wanted to get her out of that situation. The guys were shocked and they put her down. Anne asks them who they are, and they claim that they were trying to help her and bring her out of the club for some fresh air. I wanted to give them a piece of my mind, but somehow I read Anne's mind and just decided against it. We were two 18-year-old girls, and they were two large 25-plus-year-old guys. We wanted to save the girl, but we didn't want to jeopardize our own safety either. So we pull her away and put our arms around her shoulders, and we carry her outside of the club ourselves. We're trying to ask her if she has ID on her, or if she has friends at the club also, and she was just way too drunk to answer. We finally got outside and saw a small group of guys and girls around this girl's age, and they see us and they run toward us and her, and they were her friends. The girls in the group take her from me and Anne and start talking to her in their own language. The guys thank us profusely, and we explain that we found her inside. We later learn that they were German tourists and their first time in our country as well. It still haunts me, though, to this day on what could have happened if we didn't intervene and save Angela like we did. Remember to please be safe out there, guys, and drink responsibly, and always have a friend with you when you're not. But look out for other girls too, because we need each other. One evening, my mum asked me to go get some bread and milk from the nearest convenience store, which was about a 10-minute walk away. Walking there wasn't a problem as the sun was still out, but it was just starting to set. I went on the main road and there were cars, many cars in fact, and people going past as well. I bought the stuff my mum asked me to get and I started making my way home. But the walk home was different. This time, I decided to take the back road. I just felt like going down the quiet route for whatever reason, and so there I was walking, when a van with tinted windows, yes, I know, very cliché, pulled up next to me. In the driver's seat was a man that asked me for directions somewhere, so I told him. He came up with some stupid excuse that he didn't know where it was and wanted me to come with him. I'm not stupid, so this was obviously a giant red flag for me. I told him no and that I was expected to be home soon. But the man kept trying to persuade me to go with him so I can show him the way. And apparently, him and I arguing was meant to distract me from the fact that there were other men outside the van who had silently opened the door and tried to get behind so that they could grab me and drag me into their van. But I noticed something move behind me and that there's two men coming at me from both directions. I shrieked and I don't even know how I escaped, but somehow I outran two fully grown men like Usain Bolt on crack. As soon as I saw these two men, I just bolted as fast as I could and they did too. I found the nearest alleyway to the main road, and I found a woman walking her dog not too far in front of me, so I decided to catch up with her and start petting her dog to kind of let the men know that I wasn't alone, if that makes sense. When I turned my head around, I saw the two men on the end of the alleyway looking at me, and they both just ran off, back into the alleyway, into, I assume, their van. I started running home, acting normal like nothing happened too when I got there, but I just, honestly, wanted to cry on the inside. So I'm a 16-year-old teen at the time, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and attending my first folk festival with a friend and her family. I'm a totally naive little white girl, completely smitten with the whole hippie thing, thinking that I'm so evolved and edgy like everyone else there. Cringe, I know. There was dancing, music, attractive people, and an unspoken and assumed kindness, empathy, and trust amongst total strangers there. Very anti-establishment and anti-individualistic mind frame. But also very anti-stranger danger because love is everywhere and everyone is connected and we're all valued and safe and blah blah blah. You know how it goes. Anyway, I was separated from my friend at the time and walking to the festival from the campground, when a tall slim white man in a white robe approached me and started chatting me up. He was weird immediately, but it was a folk music festival. Weird is normal and normal is weird here, and I'm an impressionable young girl desperately seeking approval. And he told me that I was beautiful and asked me where I was from, and I told him a small town about an hour away. It didn't say the name. And he told me that he was from the States and that his name was James in the Rain, and handed me his card. He gave it to me in the event that I'd be interested in attending another festival that he puts on in his own community. I took the card and I carried on. Eventually the festival ends, and 4 days after I've been at home. I'm at work, just slicing meat in a deli. James in the Rain enters the store and he immediately notices the wristband still on my wrist and says, "You're the girl from the festival." He continues to talk to me, doesn't buy anything, and even follows me up to the cash register to talk to me about random things while I'm just trying to serve other customers. At this point, I must admit that I was creeped out, and really I just wanted him to leave. He wouldn't leave though until I gave him a hug, so I gave him a hug so that he would leave me alone, and then he left. Later on though, I told my mum what had happened, and she actually looked him up on Google, and it turns out that this guy is a part of some commune called Rainbow People who recruit young women and brainwash them into leaving their families, forcing them to cut off all ties with their world and join their community up in the mountains. And how he figured out where I work now has me a little bit worried. So, I live in a relatively small town in a really small country. I work as a waiter in a local restaurant. The restaurant is the oldest building in town and has quite a rich history. It was built in the late 1800s and was originally just a small shack. The house still has a really old feel to it. We have antiques strewn all about the place. We even have the original floorboards from around 1940 in our upstairs dining area. And all around it just has a creepy vibe in the house. I've been working there for almost 3 years now, and this encounter happened last year. So it was a pretty busy night, and the place was quite packed. I was a greeter that evening, seating guests as they come in, taking down reservations in the book, as well as helping out during service upstairs. We had a table reserved for 6 people at 7:30 in our upstairs dining area. The guests came in, and I cheerfully said, "Good evening, how can I help you?" They told me the name that they had made a reservation under, and I confirmed. Yep, here it is, table for 6, right this way," I said as I picked up 6 menus and a drinks menu to show them to their table. "Actually, there's just the 5 of us this evening," said one lady. I replied, "Oh, alright, no problem," and proceeded to put away the extra menu. I didn't think much of it, as party sizes change all the time, either adding or disbanding one member. But I walked them upstairs and showed them to their table. They all sat down, and I started putting down menus for one side of the table, then moved to the other side, and I put down all 5 menus, but then there was a 6th person sitting at the end of the table. She had her back turned to me, and all I could see was her long black hair which draped over her shoulders. I just remember saying out loud, "Oh, I forgot one menu. I'll be right back," and quickly made my way downstairs. Downstairs, I met my co-worker, who was attending the bar as I brought the table upstairs originally, and I told her, "Wow, okay, so apparently there's 6 now. Why would she tell me that they're 5 when they're obviously 6? She just looked at me and said, "Are they 6? I remember them walking in, and I could have sworn that there were 5. I just gave a shrug and grabbed a menu, and I went back upstairs. I walked to the table, menu in hand, and noticed that there were only 5 sitting at the table now. I walked to the table and said, "Oh, I thought that you guys were 6. Wasn't somebody sitting here?" and pointed at the empty seat. They all looked at me confused and said, "No, there's just the 5 of us." And quite honestly, I was stumped. I swear to you that I saw someone, but a lady which sat next to the empty seat looked at me and said, "I felt like someone was sitting next to me too." And at that, I got chills down my spine, and I went downstairs for a glass of water. I had to try to forget about this because I still had to finish service, but to this day, I always think about who or what sat down with my patrons. This is going to be a bit long, so bear with me. Now, I had a best friend in high school named Lena. We were friends for about 1.5 years, I think, and we would spend almost every weekend at her house, listening to music, watching scary movies, and just gossiping, basically. She was just a little bit crazy, though. The type of girl to beat up her boyfriend's exes unprovoked. She actually did that once, too, and catfish people. I say that we were best friends, but actually, it was more like I looked up to her and she liked that she could boss me around and hang out with me whenever she pleased. But she was extremely manipulative and two-faced. She actually had a hobby of being nice to girls at school and then going on their social media and making fun of everything that they posted. She would befriend people just to get information from them, and when we were friends, Lena was dating this guy named Nolan. They dated for about a year and a half, I think, and had lots of troubles the last 6 months or so. He would go out drinking most weekends, and she would cry in the middle of the night and blow up his phone, yelling at him and making him feel guilty. She was borderline psychotic when it came to his exes or the girls that he was friends with as well, and they just weren't really working out, but they stayed together anyway for some reason. But at some point, Nolan got Lena pregnant, and also one of Lena's other friends, whose name was Autumn, became pregnant at the same time from a guy that I was in love with. Naturally, I wanted nothing to do with Autumn, but because they were pregnant together, Lena started hanging out with Autumn most weekends and neglected our friendship. After about a month, I just became fed up with it, and I started ghosting her pretty much. At first, she tried to apologize, but I was not having it, since the other girl was dating the guy that I'd been in love with for 2 years, and I was jealous and I was childish. So eventually, Lena just got pissed at me and stopped trying. A few months went by, and Lena had the baby. Nolan and Lena stayed together to take care of their son, but their relationship was absolutely horrendous at that point. Lena actually cheated on him, and Nolan decided that he wanted out of the relationship, but continued to see his son and buy things for him. However, Lena and Lena's mother made things very difficult for him by constantly changing the days that he could see his son and refusing to let him take his son anywhere besides Lena's house. Lena's mother would also throw out Christmas presents from Nolan, ignore his phone calls, and eventually told him that he wasn't allowed at the house. Nolan begged for months to see his son, but it was clear that Lena and her mother didn't want him in the picture. Nolan offered to pay child support, but they didn't want that either. They just wanted him gone. And so he just stopped trying. And apparently, even that wasn't what they wanted. Lena took to social media to talk about how Nolan was a deadbeat. She told everyone she knew that being a single mother was really hard and the baby daddy refused to take care of his kids. A year after they broke up, I actually met Nolan in person. We'd been talking online for a couple of months about Lena. We had shared stories about her crazy meltdowns and her manipulative tendencies, and we talked about the time that he came to her house while I was there and attempted to scare her by jumping out when she went out the front door, but instead accidentally jumped out at me. He thought it was the funniest thing ever that my face stayed stone cold and I just said, "Sup." We had a similar sense of humor, and at the time, I had no one. I had just come out of one of the worst depressive episodes of my life. It had lasted for a good year, and I had dropped out of school, been doing drugs, isolating myself for weeks at a time, and even considering suicide. But he was the one to help bring me back from the brink. He was really kind, and he was my support system. We were just friends at first, but when Lena caught wind of our friendship, she reached out to me. At this point, we hadn't been friends for a year and a half. We caught up, though, and talked about what had been happening in our lives. She asked what was going on with Nolan, and I told her that we were just friends, and everything seemed fine. But that was when her erratic behavior began. She would just randomly block me on social media and then unblock me a month or two later. Sometimes we would talk like, "How are you? Everything good?" And then the next day, I was blocked. At one point, I asked one of her friends to get her to tell me why she was doing it because I was confused. So she unblocked me and told me that she was salty about the situation with Nolan and the fact that I was friendly with him. I asked her why she kept making up with me and then suddenly getting pissed again and cutting me off, and I told her that I was tired of thinking things were good, only for her to turn around and pretend like we had never said anything to each other. That was when she said that she could block me again or keep me unblocked. Whatever I wanted was fine, but she felt that I had done her wrong by abandoning her during her pregnancy and befriending her ex-boyfriend. So then I tried to explain to her why Nolan was my friend. I tried to tell her that Nolan was all I had in the darkest time of my life. I tried to tell her why her neglecting me for Autumn hurt my feelings, but she wasn't having it. Now, before I continue, I understand where she was coming from, and I acknowledge too the fact that I acted childishly and in a really cruel way, but I had tried to make up with her multiple times at this point. I tried really hard, in fact, and she couldn't even stick with whether she would forgive me or not. So, in the end, I just told her to block me again and be done with it. She told me that she wouldn't block me again, and then she gave me her blessing with Nolan. She said that she was fine if we wanted to date, and she said that she hoped I had a good life, and I said the same to her. And I honestly really meant it. We had a bad end, but I was glad that we could at least wish each other well. And it was just a few months after I last spoke to her that Nolan and I started dating. I had waited so long because I was worried about Lena, even though we weren't even friends anymore, but she had given me her blessing and she was dating someone new, so I just went with it. But it was around this time that I received a friend request from a girl on Facebook named Casey. Casey said that she lived in a big city in my state, and since we had mutual friends and I had once gone to school in that city, I assumed that we had gone to school together and I just didn't remember her. She honestly seemed like a real person too. She claimed to work at Hooters, had made posts about how her workdays went, had several pictures of the same girl, and made frequent posts about her ex-boyfriend. So I accepted the friend request, and she messaged me telling how pretty she thought that I was. I thanked her, and I told her to message me any time that she wanted to chat. For the next few months, I was honestly just clueless. I went about my regular life, posting about the things me and Nolan did, getting my GED, hanging out with friends, visiting my mother, etc. Occasionally, though, I would see strange posts on my timeline from Casey, but I didn't think much about it because, well, I had over 1,000 friends on Facebook and I rarely even saw them. They were mostly posts about how much she hated her baby daddy and how her line of work sucked, but there were two posts in particular that caught my eye. One was a post that seemed to be referencing something that I had posted the day before, and the other was of her saying, "We all know a dirty hoe named so-and-so with my first name in the blank." So I went to her profile and then clicked through months and months of posts. Some were about her line of work, but everything else was related to me and Nolan, and I mean everything. There were posts of her complaining about her deadbeat baby daddy buying things for everyone but his kid, posts about how sad she had felt about the breakup, posts about how she'd missed me and thought of me as a sister, which is bullcrap, and I'll explain why later, posts about how I stole her boyfriend, again, also lies, and just a myriad of posts just shit-talking me, basically. She made fun of my hobbies too, had directly referenced some of my posts, talked about how much she hated me, said I was a dirty hoe, and in her later posts even went so far as to put my initials or full first name in the post. She even had people in the comments egging her on and talking crap too, even though no one knew who she was talking about. But I did. She referenced our past experiences, and it was undoubtedly Lena. I messaged Casey and I told her that I knew that it was Lena. She played dumb and told me the initials were of another girl that she knew. When I looked up the name that she gave me, not a single person on Facebook had that name. And when I told her that too, she just brushed over it and tried to get me to talk about Lena. So I played along this time and I talked some pretty hardcore crap about her. I lied about a lot of things in an attempt to get her to out herself, but in the end, all she did was send a screenshot of our conversation to Lena's account, in an attempt to make it look like Casey was real and was trying to help Lena out by showing what kind of a person I was. And Casey then immediately deleted her account. She didn't block me though, she just deleted it. I had a friend and my dad check, and neither of them could find Casey's profile, so and then another month went by and I found out that she had reactivated the account. And because I can't block a deleted account, she was in my friends list again and had access to my profile for who knows how many days. Eventually, though, I blocked her, and she then sent me friends and follow requests on 3 other websites under the Casey name, which I also blocked. But it was around this time that me and Nolan began to get a lot of friend requests from obviously fake accounts. We would report them and block them and try to pretend that she wasn't going insane. One of these fake accounts was extremely obvious too, because it had poked me and Nolan on the same day, at the same time as well. She was taunting us, I guess, but I blocked that account too. Please be aware too that at this time, Lena had married her boyfriend. She was doing this while married to someone else, in other words. But anyway, a year later I thought that it had stopped, and one day I went to the Casey account on my friend's Facebook because I wanted to see if she was still posting about me, and when I scrolled down I realized that I had actually missed a post last time. This post was Lena mocking the fact that my mother, yes, my birth mother, called her frequently to talk crap about me and give her information on me and also Nolan. Turns out, my mother and Lena went to the same college, and my mother thought what better way to make friends than by helping someone stalk my daughter. She would ask me about mine and Nolan's relationship often, and she would talk crap about Lena and would act like the perfect mother to my face. She didn't raise me, so I didn't trust her 100%, but for that reason, I never gave her my phone number, address, or any other information that I felt was private. But when my dog went missing, she tried to convince me to post my address on Facebook. She kept saying how important it was that people know exactly where he went missing from. That was obviously a load of horse crap, but thank God that I didn't, because I might have woken up to Lena punching my head in, or even worse. But for a while there, I was legitimately paranoid. Every time I went to the store or went outside, I was watching my surroundings closely, because if Lena was willing to beat the crap out of a girl Nolan had dated for 3 weeks, unprovoked, what would she do to me if she saw me in public? I mean, would she kill me? I just never met someone so obsessive like this. Let me just say too that Lena was a horrible friend. She was manipulative, bossy, judgmental, rude, really erratic, narcissistic, and very two-faced. For instance, when I felt my first heartbreak, she spent all night just talking crap about this guy, saying that I deserved better, and eventually I talked crap with her to make myself feel better, and what does she do? She goes ahead and messages him on Facebook and tells him everything that I had said about him. She guilt-tripped me about having other friends. She convinced me to abandon one of my friends because she just didn't approve of her. She would ignore me when there were other people around. If I complained about anyone, she would go and tell that person what I said, even if she had said something worse about them. She would go through people's Facebook accounts and laugh at them and harass them, and it was just a really scummy thing that she would do. She would make me feel ridiculous for liking things that I did, and I just never felt like I could be myself around her. It amazes me too just how many people Lena has manipulated. Even her poor husband probably doesn't know that she's a stalker. So yeah, there you have it. Lena cyberstalked me for 2 years, and if I had given my mother my address, it might have become much, much worse. She hasn't been trying to stalk me for a while now because, well, I cut my mother off and deleted all but 40 people of my Facebook and made all my social media accounts private to keep this from happening again. I'm hoping that I won't ever hear from Lena again. The last obvious sign that I've gotten of her still trying to stalk me is a fake account that sent me a friend request about 3 months ago. An account that was only a few months old, had the same last name as my friend, who told me that he didn't know her and only liked 2 Facebook pages, one of which was a grocery store page or something, and the other was my page. Anyways, if you've listened this long, then thanks for listening. I was young when all this stuff happened, and I made some really dumb choices, so go easy on me, please. I know I'm not 100% faultless in this too, and yes, me and Nolan are still together, and we'll be celebrating our 4-year anniversary in a couple of months. But I guess one of the more troubling things about this whole situation is that Lena, this narcissistic cyberstalker who psychotically stalks people and is obviously very unstable, still has Nolan's kid. And I, for one, am worried for that child. Over the years that passed recently, my nan's mind started to go. She started seeing things more and more. My family were all saying that she's getting dementia, which I honestly believed too. But one night we got a phone call that she was found by the police walking the streets holding a clock, and that meant that it was definitely the start of her getting dementia. She got worse and worse as the months passed and had to be put into a nursing home. which meant that we had to get all of her possessions from her house and take them to her new residence. Honestly, I hated it. I've never liked that house. It's always seemed just like someone was watching you while you were in there. While you were getting all of her stuff too, which took about 4 days. Weird things just started happening. Like boxes that were stacked, maybe 3 cardboard boxes on top of each other, the size that you would get if you got a PC. The top one would just fall. But the strange thing is that it wouldn't land next to where it should have. It was maybe 2 or 3 feet away from the other 2 boxes. This didn't happen just once, too. It happened 6 times at least. Each time the box would land facing up, and my dad, who doesn't believe in anything paranormal, just brushed it off as the box as being uneven with the stuff inside. And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll just go with that. On the 3rd day of moving her stuff, we had to carry the sofa and the armchair out. So me and my dad were lifting it, and my uncle was in another room just wrapping ornaments and newspaper. And as we were getting ready to lift it, my dad's face just turned completely white, and he nodded in the direction of the armchair. There was an imprint in it that honestly looked like someone was sitting on it and leaning on the arm part. The leather was actually moving. Not a lot, only slightly, but it was noticeable. But that was enough for my dad to just walk straight out of that house. He said that he needed some fresh air, and he went outside and we were talking about it. I was bragging like, see, I told you. Do you believe this house is messed up now? He tried to push it off as maybe just one of us had sat on it or something, and it was moving back to its original position. As we were standing outside, I was smoking and just happened to look up, and the blinds upstairs moved, like someone was watching us and then moved away. My dad didn't see it, and again just tried to say that there was a rational explanation. Now, the 4th day was the last day that I ever spent in that house, and it was the worst time of my entire life. We were in my dad's bedroom and had to move a bed and wardrobe out. My dad and uncle grabbed the wardrobe and moved it out and into the van. But then came the words that I will never forget. Hey, you stay here while we take this, okay? Put all the clothes into the bin bags, alright? I walked up those stairs like I was walking to the electric chair. I walked into my nan's room and I closed the door. I had already seen shadows and other things walk past that door over the years that I'd been there, and I didn't want to see another one, that was for sure. So I was in her room just packing her stuff away and thinking of how she won't ever remember who I am or that she's even my nan. I packed up 3 bags to the point where they were almost bursting, and I sat on the bed. And then I heard noises like someone was in the attic moving. My stomach felt like it was turning and my heart was beating so fast. And then I heard what sounded like talking from the next room. It wasn't loud, it was just like a whispering, but it sounded kind of normal. It's hard to explain, but it was just one voice talking, but sounded like it was having a conversation. It was a male voice for sure, and I listened to that voice for about 20 or 30 seconds, and then it just stopped. I couldn't really make out anything that it said, except for a couple of things. Like, it said that there's no point, and just leave her over there. A few weeks passed, and I had visited my nan in the nursing home. She didn't remember who I was, but I'd still say to her, "Hello, Nan, you okay today?" and stuff like that. And her response was always the same. She would always say, "Yeah, I'm okay, mate." Except this day I said, "Good morning, Nan." And she said, "Anthony, where have you been? It's late." I felt so happy knowing that she remembered my name for that one day. But as time has gone on, she's gotten a lot worse. She tells me things about that house and other things too, but I don't know if it's just because of the dementia or if it's true. Anyway, I know that this is getting a bit long. I could honestly make a list a mile long of things that me and other people have seen, heard or felt in that house, but I'll leave it here for now. I'll end with this though. I'll never forget the vibe of that house. It was just so depressing and like you were just constantly being watched. I grew up in an old Victorian terrace house in London. all over Britain, you have streets and streets of these traditional small two-up, two-down houses that are at least 100 years old. I lived here until I was 18 and have quite a few stories, but this one is weird, even by my standards. So just quickly, I need to describe the floor plan of my old home. In the old part of the house, there was a large room at the back, which we used as a dining room, and a small room at the front, which we used as the living room. There was also a hallway that ran alongside the living from the front door to the dining room door, and to the left of this door were the stairs that led up to the small landing that separated the front bedroom and the back bedroom. At the back of the dining room was a newer extension that created a long narrow kitchen and a bathroom at the end. The house was in pretty bad condition for years, with cracks between the walls and the ceiling that you could fit your hand in, and no central heating as well. So on this day, I was hanging out with my neighbour. We were about 8 years old at the time, and she was one of those bossy, no-nonsense, never-believed-in-Santa kind of kids. Old before her time, my mum would say. My aunt and my older cousin had come to visit, so I was taking full advantage of my mum being preoccupied with guests to keep playing with my neighbour. It must have been around 7 in the evening, I think, when my mum and my aunt ran out of cigarettes and decided to drive to the petrol station to get some more. This was the early 90s, and UK stops were pretty strict about closing at 5 p.m, so the garage, which was a 10-minute drive away, was the only option. I told my mum that I wanted to stay with my neighbour, and after checking that it was okay with her mother, my mum, my aunt, and my cousin and older brother left in the car. My friend and I messed around for a bit before deciding to go into my house to get a toy. Mostly we thought that it'd be exciting to play in the house with no adults around. And I can still remember the weird sense of foreboding and expectance that I could feel while we were in there, like something was going to happen when we entered the room. The neighbour kid could also feel it too, so we decided to wait outside on the wall. As I walked through the dining room door to head out of the front door, something moved out of the corner of my eye though. I looked up the stairs and I watched as my family walked in single file across the landing from the back bedroom to the front bedroom. This obviously confused me, as I hadn't heard the car return or heard them climb the stairs, so I called out, "Hey, I didn't know you guys were back." But no one answered. So I began running up the stairs calling out to my mum, and as I got about halfway up, my blood just instantly ran cold. I realized then that both doors were shut and had been when they walked across, and also the lights were off. And so I ran. I jumped the stairs and I ran out the front door with my neighbour right behind me. Outside, I told her about the doors being closed and how I couldn't understand why my family looked like that. I saw them clear as day though, walking in height order with my mum first and my brother last, but what had creeped me out most was just how expressionless their faces were, kind of like sleepwalkers. My neighbour then told me that she didn't actually see my family, only shadows moving across the landing, and had been too scared to move until I started running. I was honestly terrified at the time that if I'd seen their ghost, did this mean that something had happened to my family? And after an agonizing 5-minute wait, my aunt's car finally pulled up and they got out. I immediately began demanding to know why they didn't answer me when they came back before, but of course they didn't know what I was talking about. I don't know what I saw up there that day, but I'm really glad that it wasn't actually them. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.